Alright, well I am going to be doing a review video on a few of the movies that we've missed over the past few months. I wanted to kind of touch on this one specifically that came out this past Friday, intentionally on Friday the 13th, because unfortunate for them, they just missed October in regards to when the next Friday the 13th was, but this works too, it's close enough. So we have Freaky, which I think for a while was listed as just untitled Blumhouse movie for like months, and there was a lot of speculation on what exactly it was going to be. And then I remember eventually hearing that Vince Vaughn was involved, and then that's about all I knew. And then I feel like the plot synopsis and the concept and all that other stuff kind of came out pretty late, but got a lot of attention for what it was, which was basically it being, because obviously the body switching thing has been around forever. We talked about it when we did a Freaky Friday video, however many months ago that was. It was sometime this year, and how far those goes back. But it was basically advertised as a sort of horror. Like, I kept hearing the word remake of Freaky Friday, which it's obviously not. But it's that concept that we've seen forever. So, and of course we've seen it also with in regards to the genders being switched as well when the characters do. And so this decided to take a horror comedy approach to it, and the thing that was worrying me about it, which was actually probably getting a lot of people hyped about it, was that this is from Christopher Landon, who is the director of Happy Death Day. And I mean, when you think about like the concept and the way you can play with it, it's really not surprising at all to learn that this is the director of Happy Death Day. But obviously, I wasn't. I won't even go into the second one because it's indescribably bad. But the first Happy Death Day had a lot of fans, and I just really didn't care for it. I thought it kind of tried way too hard, and the comedy aspect wasn't really working for me, despite the fact that the concept, while getting a bit overplayed in regards to the whole day resetting thing, um, was an interesting idea anyway. Much like this, where it's an old concept, but you just throw horror into it or slasher into it, and it instantly becomes interesting again. Funny enough, because you would think there was a time there where the slasher genre was played out, but now we're in a place where it almost feels fresh again after all the paranormal stuff we've seen. So yeah, so even despite being from Landon, I was still kind of interested in this, especially with Vaughn's involvement and kind of getting to see him do both of these types, especially since he'd be starting off as the serial killer. And there's something about Vince Vaughn that's always really interesting when he plays, like, the really dark characters or the really scary characters, because he can really, really do it. Even if his Norman Bates flopped a little bit, every other thing, even the not so great movies like Domestic Disturbance is a particular guilty pleasure of mine. But he's played, significantly darker characters since then, and not always in horror movies. But here, starting off, where we have like an opening, kind of a prologue, where we're starting 2 days before the main events of the movie, as a, I guess, calendar, if you want to call it, when we get the days on screen very dramatically. And this opening scene is basically the opening scene of a Friday the 13th movie. And given what this movie is going for, that's a compliment. Because when I say it's like a Friday the 13th movie, I mean this could legitimately be the opening of a Friday the 13th movie if you didn't know. Um, and the fact that it's trying to almost seem like it's going for this classic slasher vibe, that's exactly where it needs to be. And on top of that, the kill scenes in this are, because you would think, it's kind of a horror comedy, it's just playing with the genre, it's doing whatever, almost maybe doing a parody in some ways, being self-aware and all that. You would think that it wouldn't get too, I don't know, big about itself in regards to actually being the genre rather than just doing a parody or being self-aware about it. So I was very surprised how wicked the kill scenes in this are. The murder scenes in this movie are wild, like all the way through. It was surprising in the same way the new Child's Play from last year was, where you just expect, Chucky has a knife or whatever. But the kills got like really elaborate and really, really gruesome. Even nowadays, after everything we've seen in other horror movies, where just there's gore everywhere, they still find ways to make you like want to cringe or even look away because of how like brutal and gruesome it is. Which, like I said, in the type of movie this is, that actually feels refreshing and surprising. That it was able to get creative with the kills like that, and even there's even the gratuitous sex scene in regards to it feeling like a Friday the 13th movie or a classic slasher movie or whatever. So the opening was extremely promising in that regard. So then we get into our main character who he's going to switch bodies with, who is Catherine Newton from. I mainly remember from Big Little Lies, but I know she's been around elsewhere. And we do kind of get a fairly lengthy intro on her where we kind of see that she's got the really tired backstory of she's got the dad that died relatively recently, and her mom and her sister and her all live together, and they're all trying to cope with it. And we get dialogue like, "Oh, we haven't all sat around like a family since," obvious trail off, or somebody telling one of those characters it's been a year, when they seem distressed, and that's the part of the movie that's trying to be genuine. So it's like one of the only parts of the movie that's trying to be genuine. So it doesn't really quite land that it's not only the same tired cliche backstory, but the same tired cliche lines surrounding it also, and the interactions and all that stuff. And it's just like, as soon as it's even remotely hinted at that the dad in this family has died, and relatively recently, you actually feel like you can just go to sleep because you know this entire storyline front to back, and it's like you just kind of have to wait for it to play out. And having to wait for the movie to catch up to you is never the place that you want to be. So that was really unfortunate to kind of start off her story with. And then there's just the whole thing about her being this outcast at school. And it's like, Catherine Newton in no way looks or comes off like an outcast in any way, especially not in the way an outcast is portrayed in this movie. So that was weird. So I don't know if it's just miscasting in general or what, but because she plays the other side of this extremely well, so it's hard to say that you'd want to take her out of the movie entirely and replace her with somebody else. But this whole like introduction of this character isn't really working. So the movie's gonna have to pick up the slack after that, which it is more than happy to do, it seems, because on the complete opposite end of that, what I really love, and I can actually see this being criticized, the movie getting criticized for this, but I actually kind of love this. Well, I do kind of wish we would have gotten to see Vaughn do more of the whole serial killer thing. What's really interesting is that while she gets this really lengthy, like, sort of backstory, and we focus on her and we see what her life is like, um, we don't really see him at all. Like, we don't get, like, any kind of backstory on him. We don't know anything about him. We don't see his little lair he lives in until the bodies are switched. He doesn't even speak. I don't think he even says anything until Catherine Newton's character is in his body. Like, after the switch has already happened, and the first thing she says is the first time we hear Vince Vaughn's voice in this movie. And I actually find that really interesting, and that's probably about... The switch is probably about half an hour in, and I think the movie's like an hour 40. So that's a significant chunk of time. But I do like that it makes him scarier and more mysterious, that we know nothing about him, except eventually we see where he lives because we see where she wakes up, and it's basically one of the rooms in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre house. It's exactly what it is. And yeah, while it would have been cool to maybe see Vaughn play a little more with this, I think that's really great for the character, that we just literally know nothing at all. And so, and like I said, we barely see him before the switch happens because he wears a mask when he's out killing people. But yeah, so I actually really appreciate that because it also kind of shows that we have no idea what to expect out of Catherine Newton once the bodies have been switched. When she's the one going around the movie killing people. So it makes the whole character kind of unpredictable, which in a way is kind of the perfect contrast for her backstory, which is severely predictable, like to the entire movie's fault almost. Um, and I also like little things. I'm not even sure if they're entirely like intentional or not. Like maybe I was just seeing things, but I felt like after the body switch, Catherine Newton almost seemed like she was taller, which is funny because if there's one physical trait you can associate with Vince Vaughn immediately, it's that he's fucking huge. So, so maybe I was just seeing things, but it looked like she was actually physically taller after he was in her body, which is very funny. Now, in regards to what Vaughn gets to do and what Vaughn gets to play with, it probably does seem funny on paper, and they certainly find ways to do stuff with it. Of having this, teenage girl in control of Vince Vaughn's body. The only big problem with this is maybe it would have been a lot funnier and maybe it felt a bit more fresh if just a few years ago we didn't have Jack Black in that Jumanji movie, that second Jumanji movie. So that kind of, and I remember, and even that I felt like was like people loved Jack Black doing the teenage girl thing, but it just really felt like one joke, and it's the same thing here. And we even get the joke that we've gotten before in a number of these, where there was that Rob Schneider movie that was doing this concept also, and they did this joke in Jumanji as well. Obviously, eventually, her in Vince Vaughn's body is going to go to the bathroom and become fascinated, almost obsessed with his dick. So there's that scene again, and obviously, as you know, that joke can only go so far, but they try as hard as they can, and it's exactly what you would expect. What unexpected thing can you do with that joke? Maybe we don't want to know the answer to that, but you get the idea. um, so there's also like cliche side characters like her friends in particular. But there's another character in here that I just can't quite wrap my head around. I mean, I know why he's here. In the long run, it's one of those characters where it's very obvious in like the first frame of them what their purpose is in this movie because it's only one. And it's a really weirdly antagonistic teacher that she has, played by Alan Ruck, and I have no idea why. Like, if they explained it, I don't remember. But he is just like a dick to her. I mean, I guess because she's like, he sees her as like a slacker, which is pretty much it. But he's just completely emotionless in the way he like berates her in front of everybody. And that's just all his character is. That's it. So, obviously, the only reason this character exists at all is for it to feel like some sort of comeuppance when he inevitably dies graphically. Very graphically. He might be the most graphic death in the movie, come to think of it. That's the reason why. And it's like, maybe it's one of those cases where this is them playing with not necessarily playing with expectations because it does what we expect, but like that's the idea, like that's the joke, that he's a character that was made simply to die, but it just felt so weird how antagonistic he was, like so out of place with everything else. Like his entire character didn't belong. So I don't know, that was weird. But as far as moving things along, they do put a clock on the movie, which is nice. By that I mean the whole reason they switched bodies, if you're unaware, is he has like a knife that he took from the crime scene. Well, yeah, it is a crime scene. The murder scene from the opening of the movie, and it's got these magical powers that they barely go into, which is probably for the better. Because if they had gone too much into that, it would have been this whole other rabbit hole we'd have to go down that's not important. So thankfully they didn't do that. But when he stabs her with it, it causes a wound in the same place on her that it does on him that it does on her, and then that's how they switch bodies. So she's got to stab him with it and switch back, and they only have 24 hours to do this, or they are permanently stuck that way. So the fact that the movie once that happens, once their bodies are switched, the movie has to take place only in a 1 day period, which can make it feel much snappier than another movie like this that spans multiple days. So that's nice and kind of keeps the pacing going. And there's in some of these you might might be come off as lazy, but for the most part they didn't bother me, and they were kind of nice. They were a bit more. I mean, they're still obvious, but they're a bit more hidden homages compared to the very, 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 very blatant homages we often see in these that desperately, desperately want to draw attention to themselves and get the audience to point them out. But there's some like a couple that come to mind, or there's a moment where Catherine Newton's like banging on a door, and it's the Shining shot, looking up at her from like the floor. And there's the scene where Catherine Newton goes to school for the first time after Vince Vaughn is in her body, and it's like in slow mo, and it's everybody's watching her, and we see all like the cool kids and all the cliques and stuff like that, and it's playing the Que Sera Sera song as she's walking in, which I can only take as a reference to Heather's. I don't know why it wouldn't be. So yeah, stuff like that. I don't mind too much because it doesn't feel like it's drawing as. Remember, this is by comparison to other movies that were doing so-called homages. This is pretty tame and pretty subtle by comparison, so that's appreciated. Then eventually we get to Unending, which I won't spoil or anything, but this is another case where I can absolutely see this will probably get heavily criticized. Maybe what I'm going to say here is somewhat it's not really revealing, but if you don't want to see anything or know anything and be completely blind, you may not want to know this as far as the way I'm going to describe it. But it's the ending might be criticized as being tacked on, because this is one of those movies where we get an ending. Like, we literally get an ending all the way up to a cut to black. And then the movie has like 10 or 15 minutes left after that. So I can see that maybe bothering people, but honestly I much prefer the movie's actual ending to if it had ended when that first cut to black happened. Because if it ended there, it would feel way too abrupt. I like that we kind of got just one more side of an ending. So, and it feels much more like almost like a closure kind of thing, I guess, because it doesn't have the abruptness that it otherwise would have. So, yeah, I'm going to assume that's probably going to be good. For the most part, I think the critics have really taken to this, but I haven't read anything, so I have no idea what they do and don't like, but I would say there might be people that don't like that, but I think it works, and it's much better for having gone that extra 10 or 15 minutes. So, yeah, so even though there is cliche shit and some characters that are mystifying, the way they act and really just their mere existence, it's still for the most part is much better than it is not. And it's probably, I don't, smarter's maybe pushing it, because I don't think they play with the concept as much as they could have, or play with expectations as much as they could have. But, and it does sometimes feel like it falls back on, hey, if all else fails, we can just pass this off as that's the joke, is we're doing the cliche or the expected thing or whatever. But I don't know, it still works for me, and I was still like really like into it. Just for with the exception of moments here and there, like there's a very forced scene in a dressing room that really tries to play the drama angle and the family misses the dad angle. Um, so if they had like worked more on that stuff and avoided cliches like that when it's actually like trying to be serious about itself, it would have been significantly better and probably something I was like super super enthusiastic about. But I do think it's very well done and it's certainly entertaining. It's honestly something I can see myself watching again. When we get like a Blu-ray release, I'm sure when October comes back around, I'm sure it'd be the perfect thing to go back to. So, yeah, I'm totally fine with it. But there's some things in it that are really irritating. But those are few and far between compared to the really good stuff. So that's good. So I think I'm pretty much going to end this here. The next thing is going to be I've been saying it. It is I am finally going to do it. The whole Saw series is going to be the next thing. It should be, and then there's a couple of more horror related things to carry over from October. Even though we're over halfway through November now, but we'll get there. And I've already shot something with my brother that I'll just probably throw out there in the next day or so with this other stuff. So until all that other stuff, I think that's it.